At 82, Sam Elliott reveals his best co-star ever. I thought I knew what Sam Elliott meant when he talked about the people who shaped his career. Then I looked at the names closest to him, and something surprised me. His greatest co-star wasn't necessarily the biggest star, the most famous cowboy, or even the person he had the best chemistry with. It was the person who stayed. Sam Elliott has spent nearly 6 decades in Hollywood, and when you have been around that long, you collect stories. Some are about fame, some are about loss, and some are about people you simply never forget. One of those stories takes us back to 1969. Elliott was barely known. He appeared in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid as card player number 2. That's it. He was standing in the background while Robert Redford and Paul Newman were making movie history. I actually love that detail because Elliott wasn't watching from the top. He was watching from the shadows. And Redford would later become one of the most important figures in American cinema. But Elliott didn't become Redford's close friend. Instead, he carried something much quieter from that experience, the memory of seeing a legend before the rest of the world fully understood what he was becoming. And now Redford is gone. That changes the memory. Suddenly, a tiny moment from 1969 feels much bigger. But then there's Kurt Russell. Their relationship was completely different. In Tombstone, Elliott played Virgil Earp while Russell played Wyatt Earp. And apparently, they didn't always see eye to eye. Russell was carrying enormous pressure during production, especially with Kevin Costner's competing Wyatt Earp movie looming over the project. Elliott remembered Russell being anxious about it. And Elliott's response was basically, "Don't worry about it." That tension between them never completely disappeared. And strangely enough, I think that's why their scenes worked. They didn't feel like two actors pretending to be brothers. They felt like two brothers who had spent years getting on each other's nerves. That's a very different kind of chemistry. Then there was Ben Johnson. This one hits differently. Johnson wasn't simply another actor to Elliott. He represented something that was disappearing. A real cowboy, a rodeo champion, a man who had lived the culture before Hollywood turned it into entertainment. When Elliott worked with him on the Sacketts, Johnson was already a legend. But behind the scenes, their relationship became much more personal. Johnson had an unfinished dream, a script called The Outfit. He had already lost people who might have helped him make it, including Sam Peckinpah and Steve McQueen. Eventually, Johnson entrusted that unfinished project to Elliott. Think about that. A man handing another man a dream he couldn't complete himself. Johnson died in 1996, but Elliott never simply walked away from that promise. Nearly 30 years later, he was still carrying it. And honestly, that tells me more about Sam Elliott than any award ever could. But there was another co-star who gave Elliott something completely different, Tom Selleck. The two played brothers in the Sacketts and reunited for the Shadow Riders. There was an ease between them. Selleck had that relaxed warmth. Elliott had the intensity. Put them together and somehow it worked. They weren't just convincing on screen. They looked like they actually enjoyed being around each other. And then we get to the name that changes the entire story, Katharine Ross. Technically, she wasn't just his co-star. She became his wife, and the strange part is that they had already been on the same set years earlier. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Ross was one of the stars. Elliott was the guy in the background. They didn't even really know each other. Years later, they met again while filming The Legacy in London. This time, something happened. The guy who once thought she was far too important to approach suddenly became the man she would spend the rest of her life with. They married in 1984, and they've now spent more than 4 decades together. They worked together, raised their daughter, shared a stage, and continued supporting each other's careers. In 2023, while accepting a Screen Actors Guild Award for 1883, Elliott publicly thanked Katharine as his partner through thick and thin. And when asked what keeps a Hollywood marriage alive for so long, his answer wasn't complicated. They loved each other, and they worked at it. That sentence stayed with me, because maybe that's the real answer to the title. Who was Sam Elliott's best co-star? Robert Redford gave him perspective. Kurt Russell gave him unforgettable chemistry. Ben Johnson gave him a responsibility. Tom Selleck gave him Brotherhood, but Katharine Ross gave him a life. And at 82, that's what makes this story feel different. Hollywood has taken plenty of people from Sam Elliott. Friends, cowboys, legends, people whose names once seemed permanent. But one person has remained beside him. The girl he barely noticed in 1969 became the woman who has shared more than 40 years of his life. That's not just a great Hollywood story. That's the kind of story that makes you stop for a second. Because careers end, movies disappear, generations change. But every once in a while, if you're lucky, your greatest co-star isn't the person who shares the most famous scene with you. It's the person still standing beside you when the cameras are gone. And for Sam Elliott, I think that's Katharine Ross.